Good evening. This is part 2 of Lockdown Ghost Stories. This is another story I've written. This one's called The Hempen Jig. I do not believe in ghosts. As a matter of fact, I've never believed in them. Ghosts can't hurt you because they're pale reflections of what they've been in life, and what I encountered was not a ghost. It started shortly after I moved back to London. I'd imagine my return like the return of the prodigal son, I suppose. In reality, I returned to a vast alien city, now a stranger in a strange land. You know, when I was young, the Docklands had been acre upon acre of urban decay, collapsed warehouses and ruined quaysides. Jesus, but it had changed. Skyscrapers soared up to the skyline, and the burnt-out warehouses were now posh flats with exorbitant price tags. I guess you're aware, based on what I've said, that this sort of thing wouldn't normally be in my price range. Normally, I'd take a flying leap as soon as I saw a flat like that. The landlord, however, was renting it at a price so low that it was a surprise it had not just flown off the market. I could not work out for the life of me how it had not received any bids. It still had many of the original beams and boards that made warehouse conversions like that so popular. Well, that blend of antiquarian and modern, it tends to be the main appeal of those sorts of apartments. Well, I immediately stuck my foot in the proverbial door and hey presto, I was in a flat more luxurious than I probably deserved. An apartment with a balcony directly over the glittering Thames and the lights of Canary Wharf flickering in the clear night. In all honesty, at that point, still surrounded by boxes, I could not have felt more pleased or lucky with my lot. Shortly after moving in, I became friendly with my next door neighbours, John and his wife Pamela. They were an attractive couple. John was a kindly, handsome man. Pamela had beautiful blue eyes and a devastating smile set in a milk-white face. I got on well with them. We eventually turned to discussing my flat and its extraordinarily low cost. Well, there's been a few occupants, he allowed, shrugging, but I suppose some things are just meant to be. Others aren't. John and I became friends after a fashion. We talked a great deal about history, philosophy and the economy and generally enjoyed each other's company, though I rarely saw Pamela during this time. And you could say John was perhaps a little old for me, but I didn't mind. Travelling business, he assured me, was the reason that she was gone, but as we chatted alone, with a drink at a nearby pub on the corner of the dock, the pub's called the Anchor, we were just sitting there, and then we went for a walk in the clear night. On the riverside, I spotted something that, given how refined and planned this area was, well, it was unusual to say the least. It was a pleasant sunny day, the place veritably shone, and best of all, there was a cooling breeze invigorating us in the warm sunshine. Amongst all the splendour of the redeveloped quayside, I saw a large pile of black stone jutting out of the water just beyond the handrail, protruding out of the water like a large, nasty, cancerous growth. I asked John what it was. He smiled enigmatically. Execution dock, Ben, where traitors, pirates and scum of all kinds would be hanged. I'm not exactly squeamish, but my stomach tightened when I heard those words. They would choke to death on the noose and then hang there in the gibbet cage. It was unpleasant to watch, but what's unpleasant was their justice, I suppose, or possibly their entertainment. I shuddered. The wind was less of a cooling breeze now, and more of an intrusive chill that was pricking up the hairs on my neck. Was anybody famous hanged there? I asked. He shrugged. Nobody of great fame to us. Though I can tell you some of the worst scum who ever lived on England's shores were hanged there. You're probably not aware of a ship which called itself the Dark Serpent, and those what sailed on it called it the Dark One. No? Am I preaching to the converted? I allowed that I'd never heard of it, and he was not. He sighed. It's a bit of a nasty story. They were captained by a man named Talbot, and he was, well, put it this way, there were two kinds of pirate. The kind that did what they did because they had to, and those that enjoyed it. He was the latter. Talbot enjoyed pain, brutality and blood. One day he made a rather foolish mistake. He skinned the daughter of a high-ranking officer in the Navy. Commodore Hodge was his name, and he swore vengeance. He tracked them down, captured them, hanged them and flayed them one by one. Just down there. John looked at me meaningfully. The corpses of Talbot and his crew went missing. To this day, nobody knows what Hodge did because those men were monstrous criminals, but nobody cared much what happened to people like that back then. I swallowed hard. It was akin to staring at a large, sleeping creature that keeps one eye dreadfully open. John gave me the fright of my life when he slapped my shoulder with a grin. "Come on, let's get back. Fancy a glass of brandy?" I smiled, and for the time being I forgot about that awful, boding thing in the water at my back. I slept only for a few hours. I woke with a start. I dreamed an awful dream of a pile of black stones rising out of the water, a soaring gibbet of wood from which hung a thick, tight rope. In the noose was a man, rotten almost to the bone, grinning at me with his skeletal mouth and wicked eyes. "Pray not for them what dance the hempen jig," he gurgled through his choking noose, his vocal cords visibly moving through a bloody gash in his throat. His skeletal hand shot out and grabbed my neck, and I woke up. I gasped in the darkness, sweating heavily. That was the last time I would drink that much so close to sleep, I told myself. I lay back down on my sheets, turned over to sleep again, my neck itching like all hell for some unfathomable reason. To my irritation, I saw I'd left my closet open, the left door open just a crack. Something moved in the darkness. I lifted my head quickly, my heart suddenly clenching in my chest. A mouse? That bastard landlord had better not given me a rat-infested flat. No, something moved again. One moment the shadow was matte black, the next shimmering faintly. I felt my throat begin to seize as I realised what I was staring at. Eyes, opening and closing. Inside my closet I could not move, but, oh dear God, it was a human eye. Suddenly I found myself mobile again, and I switched on my bedside light with a startled cry. With one bound, I was across the room, yanked open my closet with the expectation of finding some half-formed terror inside. Inside were my clothes. It was exactly as I'd left them. My chest was still pounding, my itching neck stinging. God, what in the hell had that been? Some sort of neighbour's practical joke? Oh yeah, hilarious. Angry, I climbed back into bed. I switched off the light and tried once more to get some sleep. What was it I'd seen? Despite my initial conviction, my certainty I'd seen little more than a brandy-induced illusion was starting to grow. Now I just felt like a fool who'd been drinking too much. I tossed and turned in the dark as I tried to get comfortable. Now my neck was irritating me more than ever. Absent-mindedly, I went to scratch the troublesome patch of skin. My fingers grazed the fibres of an oil-slicked rope. I have never screamed so hard in my fucking life, and I sat bolt upright. The rope, or whatever it was, tightened around my neck and I gagged. The rope coiled harder, my esophagus closing tighter and tighter. Somehow, miraculously, I tore free of the thing and stumbled out of bed, gasping, and wrenched open the door. I held onto the balcony rail, breathing in the cold air, shaking like a leaf and sucking in huge lungfuls. Blearily, I looked out over the peaceful riverside. The world was quiet, yet oddly static, as if holding its breath. My eyes were drawn to the pile of rocks by the quayside, except it was not just a pile of rocks. On top of that rock stood an angular silhouette that I recognised all too well. From it hung a rope, and from that the limp form of a human figure. It swung gently, like a pendulum made of human flesh, with an unholy creaking sound that seemed to fill the whole world. Then, impossibly, the figure turned its head on shattered neck bones and smiled a demon grin. No. Wait. I was being driven to new heights of terror, but it was not just because of him, because of that grinning dead man. It was the slow, dragging footsteps behind me. I froze. One footstep dragged like a dead weight, the other a firm, heavy thump. I prayed that I was imagining things and squeezed my eyes shut in the hope the cold air on my face, the dead man, the gibbet, and that toothed grin was just a nightmare. I would not get off that easily. I smelled him then. A disgusting smell of fish and spoiled meat. The thing's acrid warm breath on my neck nearly caused me to whimper, and by this time I was shaking with terror. The nasty, ragged, foul breath continued and was then followed by a creaking voice that sounded like the opening of tombs. Pity not those that have danced the hempen jig, for the devil has collected his due. The wind sprang up as the words tailed off, and screwing up my courage, I spun around to face the hideous thing I knew was there. Nothing. Dead air. Whatever had stood so close I could feel its breath was no longer there. End of part 1.